You're listening to Making a Living Show. I'm Robi Levy.
My name's Brad Turner, and I make glass for a living.
Brad Turner is a glassblower based in Toronto. Since completing a prestigious residency at the Harbourfront Centre, he has traveled the world, refining his craft, exhibiting at shows, and collecting industry accolades and awards. Recently, his skills were put to the test as a contestant on the hit Netflix series Blown Away, where he competed against the best glassblowers in the country. Here's my chat with Brad Turner. Who are you, and what do you make for a living?
My name is Brad Turner, and I make glass objects for a living.
Okay, so what does glass objects mean?
Glass object, I do a lot of different things. So in some cases, I'll make sculptural artwork, larger scale things. But I also really enjoy designing smaller functional objects that can be, used in your home or decorative. Or I enjoy the challenge of sort of creating a big spectrum of objects, I think.
Well, I've been on your site and I'm seeing things that include lighting. Then you have a whole section of things called balance, which are things that are literally half of it is balancing on the other half on a pinhead, basically, or on some sort of a point. And are those those are more sculptural than they are functional, is that right? So you've got lights, you've got sculptures, and then there's other objects as well, I'm saying, which are sort of like a toothbrush holder. And it looks like cognac glasses or stoppers and small vials and stuff. This is the kind of stuff. So you run the gamut of that, which you can make with beautiful colored glass, right?
Yeah.
So how did you get started doing this?
It's a bit of a long story how I got into glass blowing, and to be honest, it's usually a long story for most people how they got into glass. I know I have a few friends that they knew they wanted to get into glass when they were young, but not myself. I actually went through kinesiology and phys ed at the University of Calgary before I got into the arts. When high school ended, I was at this juncture where I'd go, is it going to be sports or art? Those were the two directions or the two things I had in my life. And I kind of rebelled against the family because both my brothers went through fine arts, and I rebelled and went into phys ed and kinesiology. And that was fine. I had plans. I was thinking I'd be a teacher or a coach, that kind of stuff. And I enjoyed sports. I don't think I was really into it. I was really young. I don't know that my heart was totally into it. I was just kind of doing what I thought I was supposed to do. And after I graduated, I kind of fiddled around and worked. But my brother was a recruiter at the Alberta College of Art and Design at the time, or ACAD. And he'd feed me a bit of information and about the program. And so I actually ended up going to ACAD a few years after graduating from kinesiology. And I intended on going into graphic design. So, I've always been really good at drawing and illustrating. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go into graphic design. And I went through those introduction classes. And, I don't think I was that into those either. I was good at it, but I don't think I enjoyed just sitting and drawing over and over. And I did take glass as an introduction class that first year. And that's kind of where I got hooked pretty hard. I picked it up pretty quickly. So there was some initial success that kind of reinforced, my enjoyment of it.
What made you actually think, hey, of these various electives, I'm going to go and fiddle around with really hot glass?
It's just, I'd heard about it. I didn't know anything about it. I thought I should try this because it's so, I don't know anything about it. It's so foreign. Nobody really knows anything about glass blowing. It's not something you can just sort of try. I mean, there's a lot of people teaching classes, right? But there's nothing like it. There's no other skills that set you up to learn how to blow glass. It's a completely new set of skills. I'm like, I should try this just for fun.
Yeah, it's not like you can go to Shoppers Drug Mart, pick up some, construction paper and some scissors, and I'll pick up a glass blowing kit as well for my kid. Like, it doesn't really work that way.
No, not at all. Maybe ceramics on a throwing wheel is about as close as you're going to get.
Right, and even that, you need the tools.
Yeah.
So you got into this class, you enjoyed it. Actually, take me through the process. How do you make something that's glass blown?
Well, you start with a lot of equipment for one. A lot of equipment and a lot of overhead. But, you break down the studio. So there's the crucial pieces of equipment. There's a main furnace. And in this main furnace, there's a big special ceramic pot, and that pot holds like clear liquid molten glass. And that furnace, it runs at about, for some reason we always use Fahrenheit in Canada, in the Canadian glass blowing season, but it sits at about 2000 Fahrenheit, which I think is around 1300 Celsius. And it's got this big pot, and that's where you keep all your clear glass. You fill it with, depending on the size of your furnace, you have 300 pounds of clear glass, stays liquid. That furnace, you don't even turn it off. Like, it stays on always. If it does shut off, if you don't do it controlled, like, you can be in trouble, or it'll crack, and then you got problems if you're a studio owner anyway. And where was I going with this?
I think you've lit your studio on fire. That's where we're at. Don't light your studio on fire. That's tip number one.
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, you got this main furnace that's got all your clear glass, and the clear glass is kind of like your blank page. It's like your blank page where you start creating things with. So you're going to need some blowpipes or some punties, which are the steel rods, and you stick the tip of the blowpipe into the glass, gather it up. So start turning the pipe, gather up some glass on the tip, and you can kind of the most analogous version of that would be like taking honey from a honey pot, because it really does have a honey consistency to it. So you turn the rod and you wrap it around the tip, and then you come out of the furnace. You try to do that relatively quickly because it is 2200 degrees, 2000 degrees. And yeah, then you're out of the furnace, and you've got a bit of glass there. And then from there, you have to keep turning. Like, you always have to keep turning the glass, or gravity does its thing and pulls it off the pipe. And from there, if you're making something really big, you'll gather from the main furnace, and then you'll come out and you'll cool that down or shape it. Then you'll go back to the furnace and gather more, and you slowly build it up larger, kind of like an onion. And when it comes to doing the shaping and blowing, you work at a different furnace. Usually you work at a different furnace. We'll call it the reheat furnace. The most common term is glory hole. So you can Google that if you want to.
It's a family-friendly show. Come on, Brad.
That is what it's called. So, you're reheating at the glory hole. You'll reheat. Yeah, you're still giggling.
I'm so happy that I booked this interview.
When I first took the class, everyone started laughing, and I didn't actually know what it was. I'm like, oh,
I'm just incredibly immature. So you're at the glory hole and you're blowing. Honest to God, this is what you're telling me. And
oh yeah, there's far more. I don't know what the deal with Glasblowers. There's much more stuff you'll say. So yeah, you reheat at the glory hole. You come out. You've got a short amount of time to do what you need to do. Shape the glass, blow in it, or cool it down, depending how you work. You've got 30 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds to a minute, and then you go back to the glory hole, reheat it, and you're just taking trips from the furnace to the bench till you're done. And you're turning the whole time, and you can't really pause. You can't just put it away and walk away. If it takes 3 hours to make, you're there for 3 hours going from the bench to the glory hole. Yeah. You can give it to someone else. Like, if you have an assistant, you could give it to your assistant and see, like, here, just keep this a nice temperature and walk away. But someone is keeping it hot.
Is there not a machine you could stick it on and have it turn? And I don't know. It really, this is a hand. I mean, you do it handmade. I'm assuming there's a machine element that could be done, let's say, in a mass manufacturing plant from a large company, right?
Oh, like glasses. Oh, yeah. Glass can easily be made by a machine. All the bottles and jars and that kind of stuff is entirely automated. In terms of handmade glass, you can get molds. You can get molds made that are going to help you shape stuff quite a lot quicker and faster for high volumes. But if it's entirely one-of-a-kind, one-off piece, a few people have invented little machines that will turn a pipe and keep it at sort of a baseline temperature. But that's for very specific uses, and you rarely see it in most studios.
Well, I'm curious now because I'm looking at the stuff on your site, and I'm thinking of other glass things around my own house and stuff like that. You said you're doing this all with clear glass, with the baseline glass, except your stuff is infused with a lot of different color. At what point in the process is color introduced, and what is that actually made of? Is that dye?
In a way, it is. When we use color in glass, we do use glass. Glass doesn't combine with a lot of other materials, so there are manufacturers out there that make glass color. I like steel blue as a glass blowing color, and it's get a rod or shards of glass that is that color because of the minerals combined with it. And also, these companies have developed these particular colors to be compatible with most types of glass blowing glass, because that's another thing. Not everything is compatible. Glass doesn't like to mix. Even a color is supposed to be compatible, you might spend 2 hours mix a particular red, and if that was a bad batch of red, it's incompatible and it'll be all broken when you take it out of the annealer the next day.
Oh, literally, it'll just shatter as it settles, kind of thing.
Yeah, the way the glass expands and contracts, if it doesn't do it properly, it'll crack on its own. When you're done the piece, you're done doing what you want to. You still have to cool it down really slowly. So you've got another kiln. We'll refer to it as an annealer. You break the pipe or break the piece off the pipe. It goes in the annealer, and that piece is then going to cool down for about 12 hours.
The kiln itself actually decreases in temperature over time?
Yeah, it'll be programmed to decrease down to room temperature. Slower, there's particular ranges in the temperature where it has to go slower. But the main thing is it just cools over a long time. If you make something really thick, really thick stuff can take a week, come down to temperature without cracking. Some big casters might take 3 weeks to a month to cool things down.
Let me ask you, you took your course, your first course, and obviously you got the bug, the glass bug. At what point did you realize you were going to do this professionally?
When it sunk in, I guess it depends when it sunk in. After the first year, after that first class, I had to choose a major. And, it was enough of a decision because my teachers in the graphic design program really wanted me to go into the graphic design program. They're like, hey, you can do glass blowing as a hobby. And then I thought to myself, I'm like, yeah, no, actually, I think I could do graphic design as a hobby. That I never took that up as a hobby, but, it seemed something, I had some skills related to that already. The jury's still out whether or not I took the right path, but we'll see.
I think multiple degrees and even more awards. I think you probably made a good decision.
Hopefully.
Once you graduated and you went out into the world, where does a newly minted glass blower, glass turner go for work? Where was your first stop?
That was, after I graduated, that was another big decision is what do you do? Now in Canada, it's a bit more limited. There's not that many of us compared to the US and that. And there's not that many post-secondary opportunities. Myself, I knew myself at that point. I was older when I graduated than the rest of the students. And I'd already heard about a residency in Toronto. So this is in Calgary. But I heard about the residency in Toronto at the Harbourfront Center. And I knew of other artists, or, at least a couple other artists that graduated from MACAD and did quite well at Harbourfront. And knowing myself, I'm like, initially I'm like, maybe I'll take a year off. But then knowing myself, I'm like, a year off's not going to be a good idea. I better actually do something. So I did apply to the residency at Harbourfront in Toronto, and I got that. And that was like a true game changer. You come out of your undergrad still relatively novice, especially in terms of glass, but Harbourfront was really sort of where I found, my creative voice or vision. And, the artists that I worked with at Harbourfront, the other glass artists and the other studios that are there, we got along really well. It was really great experience. I learned a lot from the other artists. And, of everything I've done up to this point, I think Harbourfront has been the most significant, most important part of my career development anyway. And that being said, Harbourfront is for a lot of Canadian craftspeople and artists. Like, a lot of people see it as kind of a tourist attraction, but in terms of the craft community, it's a huge, huge resource.
And is that because of the people you're meeting, the techniques you're able to get instruction on and get better at? What does it give you?
You do get that. You get into to a group of pretty relatively, like-minded, motivated people. But it also, it allows you freedom to explore things because it is a residency. So you're not, I'm not coming out of undergrad and having to spend, tens of thousands of dollars to build a studio and a few thousand a month to maintain that. You've got financial freedom, besides the fact you have to live in Toronto, somewhat financial freedom, put an asterisk by that, to sort of explore directions where you're not, you don't have to make things that sell to pay the bills. I mean, you got to pay the bills somehow, but the bills are significantly less in a residency. And I think that anytime you're trying to make something new, no matter what industry you are, the chance to take creative risks is kind of the most important thing you can have. Otherwise, there's no growth, right, if you don't take risks. And you have to have resources or some degree of resources to be able to take those risks.
Well, as you spent time there and you further developed your craft, your network of folks, once you left, you continued with your actual education. Like you went and got a master's in fine art in glassblowing.
Yeah, New York State. There's a university called Alfred University. It's actually, it's not that commonly known, but in terms of, it's a really renowned ceramics program, like, quite often considered number one in the world for ceramics and pretty high up there for glass as well. I mean, it's kind of funny because, before that, I was like, I'll get my master's when I don't know what else to do. My only criteria for my master's was relatively close to Toronto, just for, family reasons, relatively close to Toronto. And it had to be basically a free ride, a full tuition waiver. And that was what Alfred was offering. They only let 2 people in the glass program, but if you're in, it's a full tuition waiver. So that was kind of the only way I was going to be able to afford a master's program.
And what does a master's program do?
A master's program, a lot of ways. It's kind of like that the residency at Harbourfront, in that you've got some degree of freedom to explore your own ideas, to make new work, to try to put your practice in a different direction. And then with the master's on top of it, you've got the school as a resource and the instructors as a resource. It plugs me into the American scene, which is huge. Yeah, it's just another way of developing your work, and it'll open up opportunities afterwards, right? If you have your master's, then you can teach post-secondary. I'm always trying to figure out ways how can I increase my value to make a living out of this.
Speaking about making a living as a glass turner, as a glass blower, what does that look like?
For me, it looks kind of like a bunch of little gigs. I got this glass gig going on. I got this a university teaching gig going on, and that's kind of evolved through various forms. After my master's, my wife went and did her master's in Europe, and so I had to find a way to go over there and survive after that. I did some residencies, a brief one in Norway, another one in Belgium. That I was really lucky to have those work out with my wife, who was in the Netherlands. Now my wife, who was in the Netherlands at the time. But then she went to Switzerland, and Switzerland's a different story. So I had to go back to Canada. I couldn't stay there. But as I went back to Canada, a job opportunity opened up in Vancouver at Terminal City Glass Co-op, which now is it's really the largest glass co-op in Canada. A great facility for Vancouver, and a lot of people put a lot of work into developing that. But that job came up, and since I got so used to moving around from Calgary to Toronto to New York State to the Netherlands to back, I'm like, I'll go to Vancouver, I guess. And it was only a part-time job, but that was kind of part of the gig. It's like, how can I stay in the game? Okay, so I'll be the studio manager and technician at that studio, and that. They didn't pay that well, but it did pay in studio time. And that is, in terms of glass blowing, that's very substantial. Glass blowing can easily cost you, $400, $500 a day. So, being paid in studio time, it allowed me again to continue my creative practice on top of building experience as a manager and technician, which hopefully I can leverage in other aspects.
Well, and I'm curious, when you say it's a co-op, does that mean that basically there are numerous different glassblowers that are all, let's say, paying in to use a setup studio? Is that how it kind of works? Sort of a membership type of thing? You get X number of hours and...
Essentially, yeah. It's not a co-op as in, say a housing co-op where everyone's paying a fixed amount. But, I showed up a year after it was first started. So, how it first began, the glass community or members of the glass community of Vancouver sort of banded together as well with the best landlord in the world, really favor. If he wasn't there, it would not exist at all. But, they sort of banded their resources together to build this co-op. And the way it works now is, people can apply to be a member of a co-op. And as you apply, I think now there's an annual fee, but you don't have to pay a set monthly amount. But you're a member, you can book studio time at a very reasonable rate, especially for Vancouver.
Sort of a pay-to-play kind of a thing.
Yeah, pretty much. They teach a lot of classes. Classes is a big part of revenue for a lot of glassblowing studios, because people want to try it.
Right. And there's, as we were saying, very limited places one can actually try this.
Yeah.
Because of the nature of the equipment and the materials. It's not like this stuff's just lying around.
No.
So from Vancouver, you wound up back in Toronto. Do you have your own studio now, or are you involved in another co-op? I know you're doing some teaching as well.
Yeah. The longer story is that my wife, being a jeweler and designer, she got a job at OCAD at the Ontario College of Art and Design University. So when she got that full-time instructor position, it was 6 months after we had our daughter. So basically that was represented more stability for us as a family. With that stability, we made the trip back to Toronto. My wife really working a lot, trying to adapt to her new employment. And then I became a stay-at-home dad for 2 years. At which point, I was not making anything. My creative career essentially was put on a long-term hiatus, as is very common with most parents, stay-at-home parents. But now I'm actually, the pandemic has changed a lot. That threw some wrenches in there, as it did for everybody. I'm actually at a short-term residency back at the Harbourfront Center, because they do offer short-term residencies to alumni. And that has been, to the extent that I'm able to take advantage of it, it's really great. But, with a child, it's really changed my ability to get to the studio. And then the pandemic has really restricted access quite a bit. So I don't necessarily know what my creative career will look like after the pandemic's over.
What does that do to have your creative career put on hold, partially by choice, partially by circumstance? Because a lot of people who are involved in creative endeavors, if they're unavailable, whether it's for family reasons, for personal reasons, simply by choice, taking a vacation for that matter, if you're not working, you're not making. And I'm curious, what does that feel like to be somebody who's always made stuff for years and years and years, and then to have this time where you're not making?
It's complicated. There's a part of it is really frustrating to kind of try to put that part of myself away or to the side, or, even to accept the fact that I'm not going to be able to fully take advantage of certain opportunities. Creatively, I tend to really rely on momentum, generating new ideas. It kind of snowballs for me. And then you stop, you lose a lot of momentum. And then it's, with anything, right? You lose momentum. It's hard to, it takes a lot of discipline to get going again. And it's not terribly easy. The tough part is that opportunities still arise. And I don't know how to respond to them. Be like, I actually don't know. Like, I don't know if I've got this TV show coming. I've got a reality TV show coming up.
No, what's this?
I kind of thought, you can edit this part. I kind of thought maybe that was why you contacted me. So I don't know if you know Blown Away. It's a glass blowing reality TV show on Netflix.
Yeah. Are you going to be on that?
I'm on that. Yeah. It premieres this Friday.
Oh, that's awesome.
It premieres in 2 days.
This is the problem when you're your own researcher and you don't do enough research. I just saw your stuff and thought, boy, that's nice stuff. I'm going to call this guy. That's it. That's my research.
It goes to show how good my promotion is.
Well, okay. So tell me about this. So you're going to be on a show. I mean, you're going to be on Netflix. Everyone's watching Netflix. I know this is a show that has done well. This is not the first season of the show, right? Yeah,
I'm on season 2. We filmed season 2 was in February. It was February right before everything shut down. Right before, so I almost didn't do. I think I almost made the list on season 1, but then I'm like, okay, I'm going to apply again for season 2. And then I got in, and they offered to me it, and I'm like, oh God. But I did, and just partly being nervous, but also
I was going to say, you said you were nervous to be on this. This is a podcast with a guy in a basement. Come on, you're on TV in next week.
Yeah,
that's what you should be nervous about.
I know, but yeah, it was a big decision at the time because I just sort of started working again, another job. So I'm like, okay, they're like, okay, you have to be unavailable to the world for at least 6 weeks. Because he gets sequestered in a hotel. And I'm like, okay, well, my wife is totally overburdened with work. So we got to figure out how I can leave for 6 weeks and, arrange daycares, people picking up our daughter from daycare and taking care of her on weekends. And I'm not allowed to tell anybody why.
Oh, yeah. So you weren't even allowed to explain why you were off the grid.
Yeah, I can't tell people. I'm like, I got to go for 1 to 6 weeks. But we figured it out and we filmed it, and then I came back and the world shut down. And fast forward, it premieres on Friday, and I'm really curious to see what dumb things I said.
Well, if experience has taught me anything, reality shows never, ever make the contestants look stupid. Let me ask you something, because you're about to have obviously some of the biggest promotion that you've ever had. You are going to be beamed into everybody's living rooms. And I'm kind of curious, are you going to be promoting the show? Are there ways that you're looking to capitalize on this opportunity?
With the time I have, I'm doing my best. I'm trying to participate on Instagram, and, the showrunners, they're doing their part. Obviously they're doing a lot of promotion on their own and feeding me materials. This is part of the press tour this week. I've got a few interviews this week, and I'm just main thing is I'm trying to stay active and participate in social media to some degree. Largely Instagram. Obviously it's not my training, but I'm trying to at least post interesting things. I don't actually talk about myself too much, where I just need to post every single activity and thought I do. I probably
you're not 12. Yeah.
Yeah. I have yet to post a selfie. So
hey, new frontier. Just wait. You're gonna go do duck face. It'll be great. So, as somebody that is doing their best with social media, what other ways do you sell your work? And what other ways do you market it?
I guess what I do, I look for opportunities. Basically, I try not to turn down the opportunities that come up. So, Blown Away, that was an opportunity. And I know, obviously winning it would be huge, but just being on the show is a big opportunity. So I try not to, as much as possible, try not to turn down those kind of things.
Does that include commissions? And before the pandemic, were you doing markets and stuff occasionally as well?
A little bit in Vancouver. In Toronto, I would do, like the outdoor show. That's a big one. As well, when you're at Harbourfront, you sort of get connected and lined up with these things pretty quickly. There's always Ontario Craft, or the formerly Ontario Craft Council, or now it's called Craft Ontario, which promotes Ontario and Canadian craft artists. There's my website, and I'll sell smaller stuff, smaller items, affordable with quotations on Etsy. Etsy's got its own promotional tools, and I was lucky, say like the toothbrush holders, got picked up on some design blogs, and that kind of circulates on their own. Ideally, I would just pay someone to do it all for me, but not in that position at the moment. So, And some of it's just luck, right? Like, I don't think people give enough credit to just simple luck.
When I ever hear a successful person talk about luck, it always makes me think of something that my mother said to me, because I was aggressively mediocre student. I was a solid B+, but I couldn't be bothered to do the work for A's and A pluses. And my mom once said to me, she said, what did this other kid in my class, what did he get on the test? Because I got a B+. And I said, he got an A+. And she said, so why do you think he got an A+? And I said, well, I don't know, he's really lucky. And she goes, you would be surprised how hard he works to be lucky. Yeah. And I always thought, oh, yeah, she got in a good one there. And it's always stuck with me. The truth is that, lucky people are lucky because they're working all the time. I mean, it means that they're ready to take advantage of the opportunities that come up or come their way.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree to that to a certain point. I think some of those opportunities are luck, but it is up to someone to take advantage of those opportunities.
All right, so tell me, what sort of advice might you have for somebody who wants to get into the glass blowing game?
The first thing, I guess, would be, just try it and see if you like it. If the pandemic wasn't happening, you could take weekend classes at Harbourfront or various studios around. So, if you want to dip your feet, not literally, into the glass, then you can do that. And that'll give you an idea of whether you like it. There are people, some people, when I've taught the intro classes, a lot of people will sort of romanticize what it is and not realize actually how hard it is. They're like, I want to make these, really nice wine glasses in my intro class. I'm like, well, do you have like 8 years?
In 8 years, you'll have a decent class.
It's how long it takes. Because, I've made a lot of, I work with a lot of materials. I'm not a furniture maker, but, I don't make a lot of wood and I understand those materials. And I will say, like, technically glass is the hardest thing you can work with, other than probably nanotubules or something. I don't know, but it's up there. It's up there as far as handmade thing goes. So that's the main thing. Make sure you like it, and make sure you really like it, because aspects of the life can be very, very difficult. You have to be comfortable with a certain degree of instability. You have to be comfortable with a lot of failure. You have to be comfortable with breaking a lot of stuff. Because if you don't do that, it's going to be an emotional roller coaster. If everything you make is precious, because you're going to break a lot of it, and you have to break a lot of it to get better. So.
I have to ask you something before we wrap things up. In a world where so many things are mass manufactured, where the making of glass is like the making of much clothing and most housewares and things like that, where it's done large scale, it's done fast, it's done by machines in large factories and shipped everywhere. What is it about doing it yourself, doing it handmade? Why be a glass artisan when there's so much stuff that's available?
For myself, there's a bunch of reasons why be a glass artist. Sometimes it's as simple as I'm good at it. I picked it up pretty quickly. I'd like to think I've got a fairly unique vision or perspective on the material. And, it could be simple as, thinking like that's what I have to contribute to the world. And I sort of see a responsibility, especially, if you're in the arts and crafts, it's kind of a luxury to be able to do this. And I feel like that's something that comes with that luxury is to try and contribute, at least, no matter how small, but, just contribute something new to the world of materials and all the objects are out there. I feel like as long as I can contribute something new or some new gesture to it, that's what I can contribute to the world. Like I don't, if I get into a situation where I'm just replicating other people's designs, like I don't want to be a part of that. It could, that could be a route to making a lot of money. Like half the time, majority of the time when people, I get approached about a commission, it's usually just to knock off something more expensive that people think I can do it for cheaper. And I'm not really interested in those, but
there's so many people making stuff. There's so much different stuff being made. Some of it excellent, a lot of it really mediocre. And I'm asked this quite regularly, which is why bother? In other words, why do you need to be the one to take that picture or conduct that interview or create that show or anything when there's so much out there that's coming at us and available to us at all times. And much to your point, it's because it's my perspective. That's what I'm bringing to it. It's my drive. It's what I'm here to contribute. And in this case, help other people to contribute as well. And so it's an answer that makes a lot of sense. So no, I absolutely relate to what you're talking about when you say this is what I have to contribute. This is my perspective and what I bring to it. Because at the end of the day, there's lots of people who make glass, but there's only one person who makes glass the way you do.
Right. Thank you. I hope so. I don't know.
So where can people find out a little bit more about you, Brad?
Well, you can find out more about me on my website at www.glassturner.com. That has the basics. I'm on Instagram at glassturner and on Friday on Netflix.
Well, good luck. I'll be watching for sure. Thank you so much for being on the show and sharing with us how you make a living.
All right. Thanks, Robi.
Subscribe to Making a Living Show on Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, and pretty much anywhere else you get your podcasts. For more on the show, visit makingaliving.show.com and follow along on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Making a Living Show is produced by Next Exit Media and hosted by me, Robi Levy. Thanks for listening.